So many of you have expressed the desire for more of our beautiful 3D flowers, and I for one love decorating my home with some of these creations. This is going to be a great little piece that can be used at home. You can give as a gift. If you have someone maybe in a hospital where they can't take and accept real flowers, you can always make this for them to brighten up their day. And it's a really gorgeous little project. And let's take a look at what we have here. We're actually putting together some gardenia flowers. And I've already pre-assembled 3 of these beautiful flowers. We're actually putting them on some floral stems. And this is what the floral stems look like. I suppose you can use a bamboo skewer if you want. These are nice because they're flexible and you can really position and shape them very specifically and nicely. So since I've already done 3 of these, I'm not an expert by any means, but what I did was I started by covering the little floral stem with some dark green floral tape. We've got some dark leaves for this one, so this was appropriate. And I'm just going to cover it from top to bottom. This also helps because it's got a little bit of an adhesive built into it. This will also help us with our little stamen piece to get that wrapped onto the actual stem itself. Let me move this stuff out of the way. So we're going to begin by taking our little stamen piece here, and if you want to kind of help you get this thing ready, you can kind of train it a little bit just to kind of give it a little bit of a curve. What we're going to do is we're going to glue this to the top of our floral stem here, and I'm just going to put a little drop of hot glue. You can use regular glue. I actually used regular glue on the other 3 that I'll show you here in a second, one that you've already seen, but this does dry a lot faster, so it would make quicker work of the project. So we're just going to glue that right to the very edge of the little stamen piece, and then we're going to put just a little line of glue along the rest of the bottom of that, and we're just going to roll it around itself, making sure that it's nice and tight against that floral stem, and just going to hold that in place and let that really set. Okay, and just make sure that you're giving it enough time to dry. I'm just going to get the very edge of this with some regular glue as well and wrap that around and just hold that in place while it really completely sets. Okay, and then if you want, what you can do is, just so that the little stamen piece stays in place, throw a little bit of hot glue or regular glue on the bottom of that so that it doesn't come loose. I'm going to dab that and flatten it out a little bit. It's actually cooled off enough to where I can do that. Okay, and that should relatively easily hold it in place for us. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of work our way up. Now with these gardenias, we're not actually doing any inking on these. You can if you want. We decided to just leave it alone and just make them all white. And what I'm going to do with this inner piece is I'm going to begin by training these petals up. Okay, the rest of them are going to get trained down, but the center section here, we're going to train this up. Okay, and then I'm also going to take just something a little bit wider, and I'm going to fold it over through the center to kind of curl it the other way. Okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to create the center of the flower, and we're going to make it look like it's just opening up, like it's just budding. Okay, so once we have that, the best way that I've kind of figured out how to do this was just to take it and really put it really tightly together almost to create the shape of the flower way before it even starts to bud. And just kind of squeeze it together like really tight so that the tip is nice and tight there. And just kind of hold it in place there for a second, give it a good squeeze, and then just release it to kind of create that effect, okay? And that might be a little bit too much there, but that looks pretty good. So what we want to do now is just take a little bit of hot glue, and I'm just going to put a little dab right here on the exterior of the petal and get that. I'm just going to squeeze this back in and release it slowly just to kind of get it to stay like that one right there. Okay, so these two are kind of joined now. That hot glue really dries really quick. If you try to do this with regular glue, it's going to take forever, and I don't recommend it. So I definitely would use hot glue for this application. And then I'm getting into super perfection mode here, and I'm curling the inner one here a little bit so that there's a little bit of separation there. Okay, and then I'm just going to take this again, just kind of wrap it together and just release it a little bit and see where it wants to naturally go. Okay, and I'm going to put a little bit of glue on this petal here, just a tiny little dab, and just kind of glue that right about there. Okay, and I'll probably make the other ones a little bit tighter. Okay, so let's move over to this petal here. And you know what, don't stress out about this process here. Yours are going to come out the way that they come out. Just try to kind of visualize what you think the flower should look like and do your best to kind of glue those pieces together. And I'm going to stick this one inside here. And that's how mine's going to look, like that. Okay, so I'm going to put just a tiny dab of glue in here now. That's probably good. A little goes a long way. And I'm just going to hold that for a second, let it set. And there we go. Okay, so that's what the interior is going to look like. All right, so now we can go ahead and get our glue. Again, you know what, you can use hot glue, you can use regular glue. Just keep in mind that if you use regular glue, you're going to be waiting a lot longer for everything to set. So I'm just throwing a little bit of glue on the bottom of the stamen piece, and I'm just going to take this and slide it up until the stamen is nice and in there. Try to get it nice and centered, just like that. Okay, and you'll want to, probably should have done this beforehand, kind of spread those stamens out a little bit. Let me see if I can still pull this out. Yeah, let's flare these out a little bit. Just take your finger, run it across the tip there of the little stamen pieces, the ends of the stamen. And I need to reapply this glue on here. There we go. That's a little messy, but that's okay. And just feed that through all the way until that stamen hits the bottom of that piece there. Okay, got a little strand of hot melt. Okay, so that looks good. Let's just kind of, I'm gonna hang this off of the table so that it's not being pushed in either direction. I want it to be nice and centered. And let's take a look at the rest of these shapes here. So we're gonna work our way from smallest to largest. Now this next layer, this one we are gonna curl up. So I'm gonna grab my dowel or a pen in this case. I'm using this to illustrate that you don't necessarily need a dowel to do this. I just found this pen in my drawer. Okay, and it's actually very smooth too, so it does a really good job. And then I have this thing, so really, if you have a really thin dowel, this will work too. I just found this laying around and saw that it kind of worked really well to give me an effect like that. And you want to go ahead and just kind of randomly curl and train these petals just to kind of give them some life. Okay, and you can see what's happening there, how the shadows are starting to hit all of these little pieces here. And that's just gonna kind of bring this thing to life and make it look not so much like paper, like it's, you know, an actual flower out in the wild. So just have fun training this and making it your own. It doesn't have to be perfect. What flower in nature is perfect, right? Okay, so we're gonna kind of curl those petals up just a tad. And let's grab our stick here, and let's get our next layer of glue on the bottom of this guy. I'm having some issues with my hot glue gun here. And let's feed this through. Okay, and just right until it hits. Okay, there we go. It looks good. You can kind of curl this up a little bit and give that a chance to set. Okay, and now grab the next largest piece here, and let's give this one a little bit less of a curl, a little bit less of a train, just so it's a little more subtle. And then we're going to take these tips and train them downward. Okay, I could probably use a larger dowel at this point because these are larger petals. There we go, that's working nicely. Just kind of grabbing the tip of it, rolling it along the little dowel here to kind of get them to curl down. And then I will revisit some of these little pieces and just kind of take and just slightly crease things here and there in various directions just to kind of make it a little more unique so that light plays with this piece nicely. Okay, there we go. Okay, that looks good. So let's grab our flower. Let me take a look at my glue gun here. Okay, well, my hot glue gun just, I don't know what it's doing, so I'm just going to go back to regular glue here. And either way, it's fine. I think the hot glue gun is a little more necessary for that first little piece at the top. But all right, so as we put this next layer on, just want to make sure that you're staggering the petals so that they're not right over each other like that. You want them to kind of stagger so that this layer is in between the other petals, okay, just to kind of even it out and make it look more full. Okay, all right, so let's just give that a chance to set nicely. And let's work on our last one here. I'm going to grab my large dowel, and again, it's just a very subtle stroke on this. Okay, and then there it is. I have hot glue on that. Okay, and let's train this down. You can kind of curl it like this if you want. This one is a little bit bigger, so there we go, that works nicely. And you can kind of do it at a little bit of an angle. You don't have to do it straight on. Okay, I might do this one at an angle like this, just to kind of change it up a little bit. And then again, just kind of finesse some of these little edges. Every time I say finesse, I think of that Bruno Mars song. Been singing finesse all day. All right, just kind of just train things a little bit here and there just to kind of give them a little bit more life. Okay, so that's in place. This guy's probably pretty dry by now. Let's get our next layer of glue right around the little floral stem right at the bottom. And take this piece and just slide it through. And again, making sure that you're offsetting it nicely. Okay. And then once we have that all in place, give it a few minutes to dry before you start kind of finessing some of these petals. Okay, because it looks a little flat right now. I'm going to take and kind of maybe bring some of them in a little bit, just to kind of give them a little bit more life. And you can always kind of fold them like this as well, in case you didn't train them as well as maybe you would have liked to kind of give them a little bit more form. Okay, so again, let's just let this dry first and then go back to the finessing aspect of things. But before we do that, we've got this little leaf here that we need to add to the flower. And I've gone ahead and inked the edges of this, and I may as well show you kind of what I did here. Let me find this is my go-to color, Cottage Ivy, for this bundle. It's a nice deep green, and just kind of dab that a little bit and get rid of some of the excess. And I'm just kind of hitting the surface of this and working the edge as well, mostly the edge, but as I'm working that edge, I'm kind of grazing the surface of this a little bit to add a little bit of color to this piece. Okay, so you can go as heavy or as light as you want with your inks. That's completely up to you. I don't like to overdo it, but I think on some of the flowers in this bundle, I've gotten a little more risky with my inking, and it has been fun actually. So I think I already did that side. Let me go over here. This side's lacking a little intensity, so kind of jazz that up a little bit. And just work your way around. Again, put on as much or as little as you want until it looks the way you see it in your mind's eye. And there we go. Okay. And then what you want to do then is take this, and I would start with a dowel, get it nice and centered, and begin by just kind of cupping it so that you're kind of creasing it. And then what we're going to create a more defined crease here in just a second, but I want to do it this way first so that we don't mess up where we're creasing it and inadvertently fold along a line that we didn't want. So now we can go ahead and pinch this, just pinch it right at the tip, and then work your way in a little bit, like so, to kind of create that sort of look. Okay. And that's just going to give this thing a little more life, make it look more lifelike. And then again, we're playing with light and shadows by doing that. You can see how when the shadows hit that, it's almost like they create the illusion of the little veins on the leaves there. So that's a really cool thing that you can do. All right, we'll go ahead and get our glue just around that floral piece there, and just slide that through. It doesn't matter really where it goes. I think maybe you just want to kind of take a look at it and make sure that it looks right to you. That looks good to me. Okay, and we're going to let that set again before we do any finessing to anything. Let that really get a good grip. Now also, we've included these two little leaves here in the extras folder, and that is it's an optional thing. If after we put together our vase and insert our flowers, if we feel that we need a little bit more of the leaves to kind of fill in arrangement, we can use these. And all you're going to do with this is ink it and crease it. And then what we can do is just using the floral tape, just tape it to the stem. We're going to do that if necessary after we're all done with this. Okay, but in the meantime, let's take a look at the actual vase portion of this, which I have here in front of me. And I think maybe my glue gun has decided to play nice now. Let's take a look here. Okay, so our vase, pretty straightforward, is made up of these two main pieces here. But before we assemble it, I'm gonna get the panels on here because it's a lot easier to do this while it's flat. And I believe this is a DCWV paper. I may be wrong, but I went ahead and inked it with a nice berry purple. Okay, so you see where all these major pieces go. And these smaller pieces are gonna go down here. And then we have some silver that's gonna go in the middle. Okay, so we'll just get these all glued into place before we actually assemble this. And we're pretty much going to be done here. This one's probably the easiest of the three projects that we just that you're seeing now that we just released. So if you need something that's a little bit quicker, I would say go with this one. Okay, so just get that glue. Make sure you're getting that glue out to the edges and do your best to get it nice and centered so that you have a nice border going all the way around this section here. That looks pretty good to me. And just run your finger along those edges there. Make sure that it's nice and flush and nice and flat. Now I have some patterns here and I'm going to probably try to alternate because I've got a piece here that's pretty light and I want to complement that with one of the darker pieces. Your pattern may be completely different and it's something you might not need to worry about, but I'm just trying to be conscious of every little decision that I make here so that the piece looks as pretty as possible when all's said and done. Okay, so again, just do your best to get that nice and centered. Try to get a nice even border all the way around and press down. Okay, so you kind of get the idea. I think what I'll do is I'll just show you these sections here and how I'm doing it, and then you can just go ahead and complete the rest of it because it's pretty redundant and repetitive. So let's just get this piece in place. Again, focus on making sure that you've got a nice even border right there. And then let's get the smaller little trapezoid piece here. I think that's what it's called. And let's get that glued in place on the bottom here. Nice even border all the way around, please. There we go. Okay, so got one section completed. You're just going to go around and do that same exact thing for all these. Silver in the center, smaller trapezoid down here, taller one up here, and then we'll go ahead and put our vase together. Okay, so we have all of our decorative panels on, and what we're going to do first, and I've actually gone ahead and folded everything at the score marks as well, just to kind of get everything ready. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to join these two pieces together, okay, and I'm going to begin by putting glue on this small triangular tab here, since it's kind of a little center of our vase, and it's not at an angle, so I'm just going to line that up, get that right onto, right butting up against those little score marks there. Just going to press and hold that for just a second to let it initially set. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this over onto itself. And hopefully There we go. And I'm just doing that because I can run my fingers along both sides of this now, both pieces, to make sure that I've got that nice and centered. And that looks like I did a pretty good job there. Okay. And I'm going to let that kind of make sure that that sets permanently for us before we begin. And you see what I mean there? I would love to say that I did that on purpose to illustrate a point, but I didn't. And again, for the second time during these sets of videos here, do as I say and not as I do. All right, so let me just fold that over onto itself just to make sure that they're nice and lined up. I've got it nice and straight there. Okay, and I'm gonna wait and let that really set this time. Okay, so while that's drying, what we can go ahead and do is begin assembling the rest of this. So just start on one end, pick a tab. It doesn't matter if it's the top or the bottom. And I'm getting glue crazy all of a sudden here. Just wipe off some of that excess and just get that nice and aligned with its neighboring piece. And just squeeze that between two of your fingers and get that to bind and join nicely. Okay, and then we can go down to the bottom tab here and get our glue on the main part of the tab, and then a nice fine line along the edge there. And I'm going to work that right up to the edge. Okay. And just follow that angle there and join those two pieces together, and then just squeeze the tab and the side piece between your fingers until that sets. Okay, so one side now is together, and we can continue moving on here to the next tab. And we're just going to repeat this process until our vase is complete. I'm getting that glue right out to the edge there. And here we go. Just line that up nicely. This is a very subtle angle, so it should be very easy to work with. It should almost just kind of fall into place. Okay, let's pull this out and let's get our glue onto the tab. Get some of that glue right out to the edge. There we go. And let's join these two sides together. And you know, having these panels on here really stiffens up the paper and makes this a lot easier to work with overall. Okay, so just get that joined all together. Now, this is where we initially join this piece here. Still want to be kind of careful with this. Don't want to stress that piece too much. You don't want it to rip. So take your time with this section here. Don't overdo it. Okay, once we get this piece on here, it should hold together nicely for us. And then we can flail this thing around a little bit more carelessly. Okay, there we go. Pull this piece out. Let's get our glue on here. There we go. Get it right up to the edge. Okay, and tuck that back under and get that lined up nicely. Got a little excess glue that came out there. I'm just going to rub that off. There we go. I keep getting emails from you guys I'm talking about a glue eraser for those times where you make a mistake and you get too much glue in a certain area. And I've yet to purchase one, but I think I may just get one just to try it out. I've gotten a lot of feedback from you guys saying that it works really well, and I try to work so that I never have to use that. But inevitably, you know, mistakes happen, and you're going to get a little bit of excess glue here and there, so maybe it's just a good little tool to have. Okay, so just kind of working our way around here. We've got just a few more to go. That looks good. And try to get a little bit up to the edge there. I'm going to fold this down so that when I run my finger along the edge, I don't encroach over that segment onto the surface where that panel is. Let's get that nice and lined up. And okay, this is getting a little bit tougher now because this thing's kind of fighting itself. I'm going to tuck that under there. Now you see what happened there. I think I didn't get enough glue in there, and it didn't hold very well. So I'm just going to grab a scrap piece of paper. Usually I like to use cardstock, but I just found whatever I had handy. Putting a little bit of glue on one side, and I'm just going to shove that in there and kind of paint the glue onto that little area where it didn't stick very well. And then I'm just going to push and hold that in place to get that to stick nicely for me. And that's quite all right. Stuff like that happens, and you can always go back using these little tricks and tips. You can always fix things after the fact. Okay, as you can see here, I didn't get enough glue down there either. So just putting a little bit of glue on my paper. I need to flatten that out a little bit more. It's too tall. Make it real thin. And just shove it right in there. Just paint that piece with some glue, and just press and hold that in place until it sets nicely. It's going to happen. Just have to make the best of it. There we go. All right, so a couple more here, and then we're going to go ahead and close this guy up. Okay. There we go. Spread that out. And tuck that under, get it nice and lined up. And just hold and squeeze. There we go. Awesome. And our last little piece here before we join this together. And just get your glue on the tab. A little bit up to the edge. I'm going to fold that down. There we go. And let's tuck that under. Come on, tab. And this is another reason why it's helpful to fold at the score marks before you get into the process of attaching and gluing everything. It just makes it easier to work with. Okay, so we're just going to hold that until it really gets a good grip. And at this point, we're at the final junction here, where we're going to join the two sides together. And because we're doing that, it may be a little difficult to get your glue in there at a certain point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the largest tab here, and I'm also going to put glue on the center tab, and then we're going to paint that last tab with some glue to close it up, because it's going to be, you don't want to try to pull it away from the existing project that's already glued together. So let's get this in place. Get that nudged accordingly. Get that center part nice and lined up as well. Oops. And I had this piece come undone as a result of stressing this too much. So just have to be careful. There's still enough room here to get your finger down there, so I really didn't have to do what I just did to cause that to come loose, but we'll fix that. It's not a big deal. And I kind of like showing you guys when I make boo-boos, because I get the feeling that sometimes you guys think that, you know, because all these projects come together so beautifully for me, I never have any issues along the way, but I do. And you just got to kind of work with it. Okay, so here's that last little section here that I was telling you about. Now you can pull it away and try to get your glue bottle in there, but that's just asking for trouble. So I just put a little bit of glue on a piece of paper, and I'm just spreading it nice and thin along the inside of that wall. And then I'm just going to take that tab and push it up against the inside of that wall to get that all glued nicely in place. And that's going to put less stress on this piece so that we don't have to go back and fix things like I'm going to show you here in a second. But that's the last little piece there, and it would have been pretty much done had I not done that, but that's okay. So I'm just going to use my little technique here where I paint the glue. I'm adding quite a bit on here. Sometimes I notice that once you already have glue in a section, sometimes if you have to redo it, you need a little extra glue for it to really hold, and a little extra time, because we're not working with porous paper. We're kind of trying to glue to glue, if that makes any sense. We're not gluing paper together, we're gluing glue together, basically. There we go. And I'm just going to give this a good squeeze and push from the inside, and I'm going to hold this for a few extra seconds just to make sure that it really gets a good hold. There we go. Okay, so the vase is pretty much done. We've got these pieces here. I'm going to fold those in, and we're going to get our glue on these tabs here. And I am going to spread that glue out thin all the way up to the edge so we get a nice clean looking bottom. Okay, and flare them up a little bit so that as you're pushing down, it grabs more of that surface area. And with this, you may have to kind of squeeze some of the sides in or out, depending on how it looks, just to ensure that you get everything lined up precisely. And that looks pretty good. Okay, and just hold that. You can kind of put that down if you want. Grab a dowel and use that to kind of help you get that all in place. Okay. So there's our beautiful vase. And all that's left to do at this point is fill it with something to kind of make it bottom heavy, because it won't be. And don't use anything consumable like beans or lentils or anything, because if you leave that around, and I've had this problem with some of my projects, if I leave food out in my studio, I tend to attract little critters. So let's just that's pretty good. That'll keep it nice and sturdy for us, and because they're so fine, it will actually allow us to use it to kind of anchor our flowers in here. Well, now that, we talked about this before, now that the flowers are dry, you can go ahead and take and finesse these leaves, or these petals, I should say, and kind of bring them in a little bit, and kind of just start making your little arrangement here. I'm going to change the focus on this a little bit. And you can decide. Now, see, you want to have a few of these a little bit taller, a few of them a little bit shorter. So, you know, grab your little pliers or whatever it is, and just begin arranging these. And, you know, just trim and finesse and arrange until you get the desired end result. Kind of keep the leaves pointing out. Okay, and that's pretty much it. And we have 4 flowers here. Let me see where this one's going to look the best. There we go. That's looking really pretty. Okay, and a 4th flower. That's going to go right up on top here. Okay, and I think the idea of this is going to be to get them as low to the opening of the vase as possible so that you're not just seeing these guys here. And again, remember that we included a few extra little petals here. And now's the time, if you decide that you want to add a little bit more to kind of fill it in there at the bottom, now's the time to do that. So what you want to do is definitely want to crease the leaf, and then I'm going to go ahead and train just the bottom half of this so it kind of flares out like that. And we're going to use our floral tape to get this onto our floral stem. Make sure you stretch this out to release some of that sticky. Okay, and I'm going to put this on the side where there's the smaller leaves. Okay, and you can put 2 on this one. You can just put 1 on this one if you want. Or you can put a small one on one of the other flowers. It's totally up to you how you want to do it. Just kind of wrap it around the stem, just like that. Okay, and then, oh, that's really sticky. And then just flare it out, and then give it a good pinch at the end again, so it kind of maintains that look. And just pop it in there to kind of fill in the gaps. Okay, but you get the idea. The arrangement and how you arrange it is completely up to you. I'm gonna probably work on this a little bit off camera until it looks perfect to me. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed making this beautiful project. If you did, we'd love to see your work in the official Dreaming Tree group on Facebook. Just type in Dreaming Tree group into the search on Facebook. Again, if you do like these videos, please take a second to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, as always, I look forward to crafting with you again.